and welcome to Books from Your Therapist, a podcast where we talk to therapists and mental health practitioners about their mental health related book recommendations. By mixing book talk with mental health, we hope to open up the conversation around books your therapist may have suggested and make them more accessible.
This podcast is not a substitute for mental health care. It's for educational and entertainment purposes only. I'm Amanda Throckmorton, a marriage and family therapist in California.
And I'm Tara Kremen, and I work in the book industry in Toronto, in Canada. In this episode, we're talking to Dr. Thomas Vance. Dr. Vance is a nationally recognized counseling psychologist, scholar, and researcher with over a decade of transformative clinical experience. He has dedicated his career to advancing mental health and well-being through cultural responsive, evidence-based care, and is committed to breaking barriers and fostering belonging. We talked to him about his own book, My Pocket Therapist Journal, Dating and Relationships, and we also chatted about Financial Feminist by Tori Dunlap.
My Pocket Therapist Journal is a 7-week guided writing experience designed to help you understand your patterns, unpack emotional baggage, and cultivate healthier connections. It features structured prompts, daily mood tracking, and reflection exercises that nurture self-awareness and support personal growth. Whether you're healing from heartbreak, navigating new love, or seeking to strengthen ongoing relationships, this journal empowers you to show up more authentically for yourself and others.
From the globally recognized personal finance educator and social media star behind her first 100K, Tori Dunlap's Financial Feminist is an inclusive guide to all things money, from managing debt to investing and voting with your dollars. Investigating financial literacy and wealth gaps, Tori found that girls are significantly less likely to receive a holistic financial education, while boys are taught about investing and rewarded for pursuing wealth. This book dives deep into it and provides some easy to digest, actionable advice. We had a really great conversation with Dr. Vance. It was great to get to hear about how he wrote the journal and what went into that, and then also to chat about The Financial Feminist and how both books really overlap with his outlook in the world. And yeah, it was just a really great conversation.
Hello, Dr. Vance. Welcome to Books from Your Therapist.
Oh, hello, hello, hello.
Can you just introduce yourself for our listeners? Like, who are you? Where are you from? And where do you work?
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Thomas Vance, and I use he, him pronouns. And I'm a counseling psychologist and a consultant, and I actually lead Clear Minds. So it's just not just a therapy practice, it's essentially a platform where I get a chance to blend therapy and strategy and also leadership development. And so basically, I kind of help people and organizations kind of center their well-being and mental health where they live as well as work. And so my work tends to sit at the intersection of healing and transformation, because I truly believe that like the way that we heal is also the way that we also lead.
That's so interesting. So, do you see individual clients as well as it sounds like you consult for other small businesses or groups or organizations?
Absolutely, D, all the above. So I primarily work with mostly just professionals, creatives, queer identified folks, people navigating identities, trauma, love, purpose. But I also work with organizations who care more about just like productivity, but they really care about just the people at the center. And so I think a lot more through leadership and transformations and leadership development, and also helping organizations kind of figure out their own voice and purpose at the heart of all of it.
One thing I found super interesting when I was reading your website and just a little bit more about Clear Minds, which is located in Atlanta, was a blend of CBT, mindfulness, which I think a lot of people that know psychology lingo are like, oh, we know those words, but like you also blend African centered and liberation psychology, which I think, can we like talk about that for a moment and just like the importance of that?
Yeah. So at Clear Minds, I work with individuals with therapy and mental health support, but I also, again, teach and consult and facilitate. But I ground myself in more of an African-centered psychology, which kind of looks at spiritual and cultural dimensions of healing. So a lot of times when we're trained as, psychologists and therapists, it is from a Western perspective, which could leave a lot of gaps of just knowledge and just cultural responsiveness. And so not just looking at people as just disorders or symptoms, but looking at maybe a larger perspective, such as oppression and how we're all impacted by different challenges around the world and systems. I also draw a lot from liberation psychology and other cultural responsive framework. And so historically, when I saw folks in person, there might be drumming in a drumming circle, or thinking about your ancestors who have transitioned before and how to pull on a spiritual side of yourself. It looks more of just understanding who we are as people, and not just as a race, but your ethnic and cultural backgrounds, and how can we infuse that into your mental healing. And sometimes it's not look the same from a Western perspective because it's not always numerical. We can't quantify it. I can't tell you exactly when you're going to be done with therapy. Sessions might look like it's mainly spirit led. So I'll start a session and I might have an idea of what I want to use in session, but the spirit might not be there. It might just say, hey, today I want to just talk about, trouble at work. And that's where we go. And we end where we end. And sometimes we might end in like 45 minutes, then we might end in 75 minutes. So it's more spirit led to really make sure that we just honor what's in the room.
That is just so great to touch on because, like I said, I feel like in the psychology world, and for many of us that were trained at, a lot of the schools, like it is just so Eurocentric and it's such like an individualistic
Yes.
idea of healing and growing, which really does like is so it's just so one track, right? And we all know that the quote unquote fathers of psychology were old white men that were just practicing their very like specific beliefs. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I definitely wanted to touch on that because we've had all different types of therapists on here. And I'm like, oh, yes, like we need to talk about this because there's something about the collective healing, which is so important. And yeah, so thanks for sharing a little bit deeper into that. What inspired you to do this work? Like, why did you become a therapist?
So honestly, I've been always wanted to become a psychologist since I was in sixth grade. So both of my parents were connected to the mental health field. So my mom is a social worker, and she focuses more on Alzheimer's and geriatric care at a nursing home. And my dad was a drug and alcohol counselor, and so I was surrounded by it. But even as a child, I was just always curious about people. Sometimes when you're young and you're constantly curious, you ask a lot of questions, which sometimes it can land as being defiant or like, why aren't you listening? Or why are you always questioning authority? And it wasn't that. I was just deeply curious. I just wanted to know, just why, what did that look like? And then also I just noticed people just always just came to me and gravitated towards me to just tell me all of their stuff. I used to play basketball in high school, and the bus rides to the different games, the cheerleaders would come and sit beside me and just talk to me about their boy problems. And I was like, why is everybody coming to me to just talk? And I just realized that I think a lot of it's just a gift. You're just drawn to it. You just have this aura of just openness. And I always take this truly just non-judgmental perspective in my own personal life, and just know that all of us are just trying to just navigate this thing called life. And over time, it's just been drawn to just therapy and just creating space. I feel like, yes, I'm a therapist, but I just see myself more as just a healer and having this healing centered space. And it comes in all different types of ways. Sometimes it's talk therapy. Sometimes it's through a journal. Sometimes it's through an Instagram post. Sometimes it is just walking in the store and you just see somebody and just acknowledge their existence. And all of those are forms of healing. And I just see myself just constantly being aligned in different parts of my life to that space, that healing space.
Mm. Would you say that this has been a calling for you?
Yes, the call
Mm-hmm.
before I even knew it was a calling.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my DNA. And, again, taking that more African-centered perspective or more cultural perspective, we just happen to call it therapy or therapist. But when we look at it from a global perspective, we have shamans and we have hijras who are in, Indian cultures, who are folks with trans experience. And we have so many different types of ideas and people all around us in our communities that are healers. And I think just in the US. We just happen to call some of them therapists, but they can also be our teachers. They can also be religious or spiritual practitioners. And so there's so many different lanes of healers.
I'm so happy we're having this conversation because I'm just picturing sort of in my imagination's kind of going like, "Woo, what does this sh session look like for you?" But just how, yeah, if you want to be, a licensed practitioner, you have to go through this very specific, arduous process.
Yeah,
And there's so much creativity. Like the way you're speaking about this is like, okay, you're a doctor and you still bring in all these other aspects that maybe weren't something that was like necessarily taught in a grad school program. So I just get excited because I'm like, there's so much potential for mental health practitioners to bring in these other aspects. And like, there's this very real system that has to be navigated too.
absolutely, absolutely. And I was specifically trained in the African Center of Psychology,
Mm,
utilizing other therapies that I didn't learn in school.
hmm
So the type of therapy I use is called optimal conceptual theory. And the inventor, the founder, is a Black woman out of Ohio State named Dr. Linda James Myers. And she created this theory based off of our systems of oppression. And to get to this theory, we have something called belief systems analysis. And so, really, it is a cognitive rooted systems, kind of like reminds people of CBT, a cognitive behavioral therapy flair, but it's all in our minds and thinking about the different areas of just being in our belief system. And so essentially I can't change a lot of the things in your life, but what would happen if we can reframe and think about our belief systems and where they're actually coming from? So are you really an anxious person, or are you anxious because you're stressed from the systems that we exist in, from oppression? And so I don't necessarily blame you as the individual, the person, but let's just focus our energy on just acknowledging the systems that we exist in, and then let's figure out tools or ways to navigate that. And so kind of like releasing some of that personal responsibility or blame and enter more of that self-compassion, understanding from a cognitive perspective around the world that we live in.
Mm. It's so cool to hear this and for you to be able to share this with our listeners. So thank you.
Of course, of course.
Yeah, I love hearing about it because I'm still like, I feel like don't know, obviously not as much about therapy as either of you. But sometimes it can be easy to just think of therapy as like one thing. And even thinking about like CBT with something like that's like, oh, there's two things. And now you're opening up this whole other area of like, there's various different ways. And I guess that's why it's so important to really try and find the right fit when it comes to like finding a therapist that's really going to help you through what you actually need help with.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So who do you primarily work with then? What kind of parts of the population?
I still primarily work mainly with adults and professionals. A lot of them are like millennials up and even a couple Gen Z I tend to work with. But usually, again, it's spirit-led. I'm never just trying to like find somebody. People usually find me in some type of way. And the collective, all the people that I tend to work with tend to be they're professionals or they're folks of color. And majority of them tend to be queer folks. And people have the similar theme of trying to navigate relationships and self-doubt and self-worth and trying to navigate the work life and what does it mean and navigating grief and identities are constantly shifting and evolving. And it's something that I can identify with as well as constantly just evolving and changing. And so it's really just amazing experience where people just don't find me by accident. I don't think none of my clients and I just connect just by chance. I always think that there is some divine interventions happening of landing that person for me at the right time, at the right moment. And I think that's like the beauty of where I really truly feel connected to my work and the person in front of me.
Before we get into your book picks, which are one you've written yourself, is there
Yeah.
anything else that you'd like to share, either professionally or personally, before we jump in?
No, I think it's from us, it's gonna come on out. We're gonna make it and be spirit led, and it's gonna come out if it needs to come out.
Okay, I'm excited.
All right, so let's jump into your book, which is My Pocket Therapist Journal,
Yeah.
Dating and Relationships. Can you tell us about this book and what inspired you to write a guided journal?
Yeah, so this journal is a 7 weeks experience, and it's really centered around the themes like self-knowledge, past hurts, boundaries, defining just dating and continuing your healing journey. And so you have a prompt, and then after it has to have an aftercare section, and that part was really, really important to me. And so I really wrote this back when I was in grad school, if I had to really be honest. And so go back in history. In 10th grade, my teacher told me that I was a horrible writer and that I would always need support. And so that was the seed that stuck with me. And that was part of my life journey, all throughout, even to this day. And I have written articles and academic books all across, but that voice is still with me. When I was in grad school, I just had this idea where I saw, other journals, and people will always say, hey, I want to journal. And I'm like, yeah, this is what I do. This is how I navigate my own things. Just journal, just write. And people were saying, well, what do I write about? And I'm like, just free associate, just write whatever comes to mind. And a lot of people were struggling. And so then I was like, well, let me try to find like a journal that I can just guide people to just start utilizing. And I found journals, and they were very beautiful, made and crafted and designed, but they were missing a prompt that had more depth, not just so much of, think about your day and write down what you're grateful for, but more of like more deep reflection. Have people go within and then start writing the why. And then once they write the why, give some people some tools to actually utilize. And so I had this idea and I started writing some, but then I stopped. That self-doubt kicked in, and I was like, I'm not a writer. Like, I can't do this. Why would anybody want to like listen to me? And back then I was just a grad student, and I was like, I'm not even a professional. And like, why would people want to hear this voice? And so I put it on pause for a couple more years, and until I finished my master's and I was wrapping up my PhD, and I was in residency in Boston. And I end up meeting somebody else, another friend of mine who is a fellow psychologist, and she specializes in Black women. And so I was like, oh, why don't we just combine ideas? Like, you're a writer, I'm not, and this could be our synergy that we can have. And so we started writing a few pages, but then it started turning into more like a textbook. And for me, again, I'm really spirit led, and just I write and craft everything off of just how I feel. So I don't do well of like write every single day unless you have to. So it got me through grad school, but my creative process is more of like leaning more towards my most authentic self. And I think that's why people tend to gravitate towards it, because it truly is me. And so we stopped writing because it didn't align to the vision that I really had in my heart. And so I put it on pause again for more years and sat on it. And so I started this journal probably like back in 2018, and it was just sitting. All these ideas, these dreams, these hopes, this vision just sat for on the shelf for many years. And then after pandemic, I left New York where I was living, and I moved here to Atlanta and started dating and doing my own relationships. And out of nowhere, the relationship ended. It was abrupt. It caught me off guard. And I had all the feelings and all the just like whys, and like, you should know this. You're a psychologist. Why didn't you pick up the signs? And then my humanist really just came out.
Hmm.
So after that, I do what I typically do. It's like I tap into my own just knowledge, and it's like, all right, what would you do or tell your own client? And I was like, well, I got to do my own eat, pray, love. I know how to get myself out of this stuff, and I got to process all my feelings and thoughts. And that was really the catalyst to help me finish the journal. I guess I'm a Taylor Swift. You just write about your breakup. So I just wrote about my heartbreak, and then I just started mapping it all out. And I was like, oh, that was the final piece that I needed. I know how to get this stuff out and process it. What would happen if I just start writing my system, my process, or the different topics that I think about when I'm doing my own healing process, and just write it in like a 7 week process? And I want to figure out, what would I tell my people that they would do? How can they start utilizing community and utilize a lot of the African-centered practice that I tell my clients, and make it in a journal form? It's kind of just like having your therapist in your pocket, which is why I named it my pocket therapist. And it's like having your own therapist in your pocket, where you can just literally just grab it and it's just process, because a lot of times the answers, the gifts, the knowledge is already within us. And what would happen if we just pause and just think and start going inner and pulling those gifts and those solutions out of ourselves? And so that was really the catalyst of just spearheading it and moving it forward and writing it all out and tying it to the cultural aspects. And then also trying to address some of the things that I noticed as a therapist of, trying to find a therapist and the cost of finding the therapist. And it's costly and we might not have all the times or the resources. And so what's another way I can kind of advocate to make things a little bit more affordable? It doesn't replace a therapist, but maybe this can be another solution of healing.
Well, I just want to say, because I picked this up and was very drawn toward it, and I am kind of a journaler, but I'm terrible in that I know I should do it and I'll feel good when I do it, but I just can't get myself, I just can't make myself sit down and do it. I journal the best on a plane when you're like literally have nothing else to do, and I never watch anything. I'm just like reading or journaling. But the prompts I thought was very encouraging, just as like somebody that has used this journal. That's what I really liked about it, that it's a short little snippet that I do in the morning with my coffee, and then you kind of ruminate on it for the
Of
day. So just thanks for that because I've been enjoying it.
course.
And like this is it's so cool to hear your journey with it too, because one thing that's really standing out to me is connecting to what authentically works for yourself as opposed to trying something on. And there's just like, and it's like, here's Tara who lives in Toronto who picked this up in Atlanta, right? Like the people that it's meant for, it's going to find,
Uh,
right? And so I love to hear the journey because you tried on different ways of doing this and like ultimately it seems like came back to something that would benefit you,
yeah,
right? So yeah, just that's really nice to hear. And I think nice for listeners or folks that are interested in tapping into their own creativity, that it's okay to like to be super authentic in that.
absolutely. And it's scary. And it is a vulnerable space to be in. When I think about like I remember writing and adding the snippets at like the bottom to like showcase some of me, and I was like, oh my goodness, like people are gonna read this and think that I've like lost my mind, or am I gonna lose my credibility, or are people gonna be so judgmental towards me? And I just said, well, oh well, like nobody can tell me about me, and this is my lived experience, and I have all done the things that a lot of these readers have done as well. And what would happen if I just said it out loud?
No, I found that the snippets really it helps just sort of like soften some of it because when you're going through this, it can be potentially like a heavy thing that
Oh,
you're going through, and having that little personal snippet where you're very open in the book. I enjoyed it personally, but I was kind of wondering if that's, and maybe a question for you, Amanda, as well, is like, is it hard to open up personally or like be open as a therapist with, I don't know, like kind of keeping a boundary between therapist and client, or how much of yourself is okay to bring forward?
well, when I was training, they told me less is more and boundaries, and you overshare, and what is the reason why you're sharing, and all of those rules. But grounding myself in more an African-centered perspective, it is more of a participant dynamic, and it's not necessarily the therapist and client, but we're both sharing the space. And when you grow, I grow. When I grow, you grow. And a lot of times we both share this common experience of just life. And I will share those moments when it is, appropriate at that timing. And also, I think it humanizes me. I want clients and people who are thinking about therapy just in general to know that their therapist is also navigating life as well. And I don't have all the answers. And I'm also confused and trying to navigate my own heartbreaks and dating life and self-doubt. And that's a common experience. And sometimes when we just sit, and this from my opinion, just sit like this blank slate all the time, it can potentially put up this facade that, I am perfect, I have it all together, and I want people to really feel comfortable with me. I want you all to know that you can tell me everything, and I know you're still not going to tell me everything, but you do have that permission to just be honest with yourself and with me, and I'll do my best to problem solve when I can and support when I can. And also, I will tell you when what I think. A lot of my clients, really want to know, hey, Dr. Vance, what do you think? I want to know what's going on in your brain. And I tend to share. I'm like, listen, I was so surprised when you went on a date with that person and you said that was your boundaries. If you can do it all over again, what would you do differently? Definitely, I've been there before. I get it. I sent that text late at night when I know I shouldn't, and this is how it impacted my life and my disaster. And I'm just myself. And I think the greatest strengths or the greatest, gift we can give to others is just to practice being ourselves and practice vulnerability. And I use those words intentionally, practice, because I can't expect you to be vulnerable. But can expect you, or hopefully I can create a space of bravery where you're able to showcase parts of yourself, that part of yourself where you're willing to be psychologically safe with me and to share those experiences, and we can have this shared experience together that we can create. And that's where that growth and healing can come from.
For me, this is such a therapist-y response, but it's like, it depends, right? For me, it's so much based on the relationship that I have established with my client. I've had some clients for years that I genuinely love. Like I'm growing alongside with them. And, I think it's my hope is that I can share something with someone, and if it's too much, the relationship is enough where they can tell me that, right? But I agree, this sort of like blank slate Western, like Freudian idea of the couch and someone behind taking notes is so, what is that, right? Like
But that's
that
what I
is not,
picture. I don't know why. That's like my
yeah.
my picture for a therapist. And I mean, even though I do mine on Zoom, right? I've never done it in person, so I don't know why I'm even imagining that. But yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's a relationship. It's a relationship that it part of me is in there, right? And should be. And I think if I feel like I'm centering myself, that's different than sharing personal things to like support the person because we're both humans in
Oh,
this trying to figure it out, and they have their own innate wisdom that I'm here to help bring out, not share exactly what, I think necessarily. So, yeah, I agree. And it brings up a lot of interesting conversation too about how therapists are trained and what we're told in grad school versus like what the reality is
oh.
when, yeah.
I'm expressive in my therapy
Yeah.
sessions and I relax. I spin in a chair and I'm dramatic because that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my clients like seeing that. They're like, oh, my therapist is like real. Dr. Vance is going to tell me if I'm out of order. Like they trust
Mm-hmm.
me to do that. And I know that it lands. And my client's been with me for years and I'm trying to get rid of them. And they're like, no. And every time I start my first session with a new client, I said, my goal is to give myself a pink slip from you. And they're like, wait, what? And I was like, yeah, my goal is not to have you depend on me. And my goal is not for you to have like a crisis or a problem that will come your way. And you have to say, oh man, I need to call Dr. Vance because I can't solve it. The goal is to inspire, empower, and to give you tools to help yourself out. And then eventually our relationship will start shifting to more of like a consultant. And you will go through life and hit your own roadblocks and solve your own problems. And then just talk to me about it of how you handle it. And then that's when I know that we are in a great space where you can actually handle everything. And sometimes you just need me just to cheer you on and to be that like supportive space for you.
Can you speak to a little bit of the common patterns that you might see with your clients if they're struggling with dating?
Yeah, it's common patterns when it comes to dating. Is this constant anxiety of, oh my gosh, they don't like me, or I don't like, what does that really mean? Or trying to interpret things. I think sometimes with like dating apps is also an interesting topic that always comes up. And I try to explain to people, and some of it comes from like the research. I'm an adjunct professor over at the New School out of New York, and we do a lot of research around dating apps and how people interact with each other, and particularly even when we're in COVID and lockdown and how people try to navigate dating or dating apps. And historically, like well, dating apps. sounds like a great idea, and there's maybe some good ones out there, but we losing out on some of those commonalities. And so right now it's pulling off of your geographic location, which maybe historically, maybe you were introduced to your romantic partner from a family member, friend. There's some type of commonality that links us together. And then currently now it pulls off of geographic location. Now you're sifting through all these different types of people and having all these different types of interactions, but ultimately it's values that are not aligning. And so we're constantly getting hit with different values. And sometimes we can start internalizing all of those rejections when our values are not aligning, but we interpret them as something is wrong with me. And so, what should I do, or how can I get better? And sometimes the problem is not you. Sometimes, that is like your own blessing in disguise to, just protect you. And I know they look great and I know they make you laugh. And also, let's figure out our values. I'm constantly bringing up values in dating and
Mm,
relationships. What are your values? I don't care how nice they are. I don't care how fine, attractive, y'all have great dates. But if your values
hmm
are not aligned, you're going to notice some challenges that are constantly popping up. And if you start noticing some patterns of those same common values that are popping up, let's have a conversation about that and the why. What is really underneath those pieces? What are we attracting, or what are we not putting up our own boundaries with certain people? And so I notice a lot of patterns of boundary settings. I notice patterns of maybe just being too forgiving and just ignoring those, as I put in the book, ignoring those red flags and coloring pink, because I am a fellow person that does that or did that, which, I see a red flag and me being me and so understanding and empathetic, I'm like, well, it's because of this, and this, and oh, I get it and I understand. And that can be true as well. And also, red flags are not bad. Those are just like warning signs of what decisions you need to make. And sometimes I will just ignore all those warning signs. It's like driving a car and your gas light is on and you just keep on driving. It's going to
hmm
get you a little bit longer distant wise, but eventually it's going to go out. And so how do you stop and really evaluate those red flags or that light when it comes on at that moment? And start trusting yourself to make the right decisions. Sometimes it's not about, I don't trust them. I don't trust, that person. It is, do I trust myself enough to make these right decisions? And if we start practicing looking within and ourself and our own being, we'll guide ourselves to the right relationships. And I tell people there's 9 billion people on Earth. So statistically, you'll be okay. Timing might be a little bit off or longer, but the numbers are on our side. And so thinking about it from that and like to add humor all the time in my sessions, people are just like, okay, might not come right now. I said, listen, it might not even be in your state.
hmm
I have been trying to, date around the whole entire world and listen, still not there for me yet, but I'm going to keep hope alive and just keep on swimming. And so I think those moments we see patterns of, am I enough? These red flags, these boundaries, should I overlook these things? What would my family think? Or this is a person that I typically wouldn't date, and what do I do with this information? And how do I actually feel is where I try to ground people. How do you feel,
mm
person? Your body will tell you before your mind even catches up. Oh, I get butterflies every time I see them. Okay, in Disney, that's fantastic. However, butterflies is actually a stress hormone in your body that's trying to alert you. And I know we got taught that that is like good sign, but it's actually you're a little stressed. Let's unpack that. Let's listen to that stress and figure out, is this a negative stress or is this stress that we can like grow towards? And if we are stressed, what are we thinking? Are they evaluating me? Do they like me? And if now we're thinking those things, why are we thinking those? Like, what's coming up with that? Like, what does that mean?
mm.
Can I just
You-
add that dating apps are pure hell? I
Yeah.
just like I know that they're like a necessary evil, but man, they're just so difficult. But somebody compared them once, which really helped change my mindset and like maybe take it like a little less seriously, that they're basically casinos. They don't want you to succeed. They want you on the apps, you know? So it's all about how you treat the time with them to make the most of this experience that is trying to keep you inside like a smoky space and never leave.
Yes.
You touched on this really briefly before, but can you talk a little bit about why you have the aftercare section
Yeah.
after each prompt?
Yes, I give aftercare to tell people with what? Like, what do I do? And how can I actually, continue growing and being intentional? I think it's great to have these prompts. And again, I kind of wrote like this particular journal of, all right, what can somebody do if they're not connected to therapy? How can I give them some tools and some cultural tools? And so you will see tools in there from, ask a family member or a community member or somebody for advice. Or what would they do? And that's like a way attendant that kind of grounds it from a more African-centered perspective to get people to realize that healing can also be in your family dynamics or community. Healing can also, be in all different forms outside of therapy. I know we get taught that therapy is like the only way to heal or the only way to do intentional healing, but I believe there's so many other ways to be intentional in your own healing journey. And I think those aftercare ideas are just other strategies that people can have more access to if they just happen not to be connected to a therapist at that moment. And so it's really intentional to just add that to help people out. Just in case you're not in therapy, here are some other tools that you can potentially use that might be helpful.
And the book itself is really beautiful. Like the physical book is very nice to write in. And just because of my work in the book industry, I'm curious if you can talk about like what went into the production and just how did the physical book come about?
Google. I got the journal, and the reason why I made it like this was I wanted people to be proud to have it. I wanted to be a journal that felt good in your hands. I wanted to be a journal that felt like quality and not just like this mass-produced thing. I wanted like the page inside to actually like feel like a cheap piece of paper that you're just writing in. And I wanted to you to just say, all right, this is my journal and it feels good. And I invested money. This is your investment to yourself. And I wanted this journal to look calm, a calm color. So I just picked this color and how it's going to be laid out. I envision, and I don't know what none of this stuff called in books, so it's not my language, but I was like, I want those things on the side of it that, when your book hits, it's not going to bend up your corner of your pages. And and I was
I
like,
don't even know what they're called. Don't worry about it. I don't think anyone does.
I was like, I want the pages to feel like you can get and write in it and that you're proud because I want you to actually use it. I don't want it to be a journal where it's just like, I wrote 2 pages in it, but you're actually like, oh no, like that's my thing. Like I love it. It is my moment for me to just be myself. And so I wanted to pick the materials and I Google a lot of it of, hey, like what is that material called? And like how do I go find these materials or who do you navigate to produce this? And oh my goodness, this costs a lot of money to mass produce. And how do people pay for it? And so all of it is fully, funded by me. And navigating all that and trying to, think about the color, like psychology of color and figuring out what colors can actually be calming and smooth and try to kind of align it closer to my brand design and colors. And so like that was like the thought process behind it is I wanted to be not just a flimsy book that people just it looks like all the other books, but people are just like, oh, this book feels like good quality. And then if you order it on my website, I actually put it in a whole box and I write you a note myself and send it to you directly from me. And the reason why I do that strategy is, I don't know, I feel like when I look at this journal and everybody reads it, I feel like it's like a piece of me going with that person. And I really want that person to know that like, A, I truly value and appreciate them for even just considering it. But then also know that, hey, I'm really truly rooting for you. Like I'm not just saying it just because, but I truly want you to do well. Like I truly value just your energy and this piece together, and that there's a reason why we cross paths. And who knows what this book, this journey can take both of us.
Nice. I love that you put this out yourself as well because I also primarily work with independent authors, but only on the digital side. So this is just it's a nice little coincidence as well. Do you have any ambitions to write another journal or perhaps like a longer form book or anything?
Yes, so I am currently writing another one. So my Pocket Therapist journal is going to be a series. And so I'm thinking, and this is still just in draft form in my head, the next one is going to be about anxiety and depression and grief. And again, everything's spirit led. And I started writing that one a couple years ago, centering and dedicated to my dad. So he got liver cancer, ended up passing. And so I started writing as my own way of healing and my own anxieties. So when he was living, started writing, and I was like, oh my goodness, I have this anticipatory anxiety. It's like knowing something is coming your way, you just don't know when and what to do with that and how to name it. And then talking about, these depressed moments of trying to navigate these new jobs that I was having and getting and not happening in and how to navigate these transitions in my own life. And how do you start navigating grief when it pops up, and how do you name it and claim it and start adapting to it? You don't get rid of grief, you just adapt around it. And so that is the next one that is currently almost done, actually. I got back into the spirit a few weeks ago and I started writing it. And now I'm like, all right, you're going to throw it out. And now it's time for you to start editing and figuring out, do I want it in a journal form? Do I want it in a workbook form? I don't know just yet. And I've been thinking more about, all right, like, how am I going to get this out? Like, what lessons that I learned from this first journal that I can actually improve and actually get it out to more people? Because again, I never saw myself as an author, never saw myself. This wasn't my goal or mission. And I did learn lots of lessons. And, I have the journals that, again, I ordered these journals maybe years ago, a couple years ago, and they've just been sitting. And I've been doing all the marketing and everything myself. And it literally wasn't until earlier this year I was walking in Ponce City Market in Atlanta, and walking in the store, and I was like, huh, I wonder if I can get my journal in here. And I literally just asked the question and went through the process and got the journal there. And then since then, people have actually been buying it and reaching out and telling me, and I was like, wow, this was an area that was outside of my knowledge wheel. And this is not my area. And for me, it's all trial and error. And so the next book, I learned a lot of new lessons and trying to think and strategize more of, now how do I get this out? And so who knows, maybe you and I have some future work together to do.
Oh, that would be exciting. But yeah, I wanted to shout out where I found the book, the store that you were just talking about, the Village Retail, because I loved
Yeah.
it. I wanted everything in there, but I only had a tiny carry-on luggage. So I was like, I can buy a book. And it just had like such a nice vibe to I mean, I loved wandering around Atlanta for a few days in general, but it was really nice. But in the store, there's a big neon sign that says support as a verb. And I was
Yes.
just wondering if you could maybe like talk about what that means to you.
Yeah, for me, support is action. It is sending a message. It is buying the journal. It is showing up. It is liking something. For me, it's just not just about words. It's truly just energy. It is someone saying, I see you. I believe in you. I hear and see what you're doing. And so support doesn't necessarily mean the financial piece. Sometimes it is just creating space. Sometimes it's walking down the street and acknowledging somebody's existence is support to one's spirit. And so that's what support really lands and intertwines when I think about it.
Nice. And I think we could keep talking about this, but let's move on because I don't want to keep you all day to the second book that was the book of your choosing, which
Yes.
you chose, The Financial Feminist, Overcome the Patriarchy's Bullshit to Master Your Money and Build a Life You Love by Tori Dunlap. For listeners who may not have read this book, could you give us a little bit of an overview and tell us why you picked it?
Yeah, so Financial Feminist, I'm trying to figure out, I think it was maybe on TikTok. It just happened to stumble upon her. And for me, the book is really just connecting and talking more about just finances and really centering women and other folks who might have more marginalized experiences, and talking about, the unequalness piece of women and investing and saving money and being knowledgeable about money. And that is something that I could relate to, also just being just a Black person in the US. And growing up for me, my parents would say, save money, but they didn't like say like how much or how to do it or where to do it. And so I've been the last couple of years just in my own journey of trying to learn more about that personal finance. And some of it was like unlearning some of the shame, because I used to say, well, oh my gosh, you're a doctor, you're in your 30s and you don't know any of these things. And it's like, yes, I don't. And I didn't learn it. And actually, it's okay. And those are the tools that I have, but now let's do something about it. And so I just started my journey of just learning and teaching myself more of this financial literacy. And I found this book, and I always read a series of other books that are around just personal finances, and it really has been really helpful to just start giving me language, giving me ideas, and even thinking more about just from a business perspective, from like my own business. And so, like in grad school, nobody teaches you how to run a practice, and a lot of times this book really helped me just kind of like connect those dots between like money and mental health and social justice. And that's the space that I kind of live a lot more in, and thinking about my own consulting and when I'm helping other businesses or people are trying to launch their business ideas, holding that money idea in my mind and how it impacts mental health and in our own sense of power. And sometimes we really have to understand that, money does, come with a lot of power and strategies, and what happens when certain groups of people just don't have that knowledge, and how powerful could it be to start, empowering other people. And I just feel like, The Financial Feminist is just one of the other great books that I, have and read that really helps kind of fill in those gaps.
No, I was glad that you picked it because upon reading each chapter, I feel like made some change that they advised, and I have to only assume a year from now I will be richer for it.
Yeah.
But it also talks about like financial education, kind of what you're saying is being a luxury and a privilege. With I liked a line in the book where they were saying it's an act of protest to be financially independent. So, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I literally was at the doctor's office yesterday and talking about this book to the receptionist, and she always asks me like what I'm currently reading. I was like, I just got finished reading like Financial Feminist, and she was like, "What is that?" And I was just telling her about, just some of the inequalities, specifically centering women and how unequal it is, from the pay gaps, from not knowing where your money's going, or if you're married, how men tend to control the finances and the why. And she was like, yeah, like I know the money goes into our account, but I don't know where we're investing it and like why we're doing that. And I was like, yes, and not saying that, anything wrong is going to happen to your relationship, but it's good to start just empowering yourself to just give yourself knowledge and just understanding, all aspects of money. And then like, why don't we teach, girls and women about finances, or how do we start speaking up and talking about money and being honest about it? And it's not just, women's responsibilities, feminists is everybody's responsibilities. And like men have to speak up, and we have to start talking about it, and we have to start being honest in the workplace and talking about pay gaps, and have honest and real conversations if we want to see change. And eventually, unfortunately, we'll start learning that people don't want to see change. They don't want people to be empowered or to be aware and knowledgeable about finances, and particularly women and other folks from marginalized groups.
Absolutely. I think it was so, they had so many solid examples of, how little boys are treated differently than little girls, or just like even like how you're treating them as saving when people are children. So yeah, it was very kind of insightful in that regard. And you touched on this a little bit, but what I think is interesting as a therapist is that unless you're working for kind of a greater collective, you are essentially your own boss running your own business. But like you said, in grad school, it's not like there is a section on that, which that seems like such a huge miss. Like, that must be a huge learning curve when you're setting off on your own practice.
I taught myself how to build my own practice. I literally went to YouTube University, Facebook groups, and Google, and I had to learn by trial and error. And like, how do you develop your own business? And just talk about business plan, and separate your money and taxes, and how do you grow and expand. And so I just started learning as I continue growing, and now in a space where I was like, oh, I like this, and now I know how to help and empower other people and other businesses from more of the consulting lens to help shape that identity for them, but then also think more about leadership development and how do you center people. And so bridging those two gaps together.
It's such a miss that grad programs don't have a business class and an anatomy class. Like, what are we doing here, people? I think it's interesting, and the connection to emotion too. As a therapist, I think there's a stereotype of therapists not being good at business or being in a helping position. You are going to settle for just what people are willing to sort of like give you. And I think there's a lot of process in evaluating your own stories about what you're worth and like how much money you want to make that year and what does that look like. And there's a lot of layered factors to this. And there is this section in the book that talks about that, the like the emotional connection we have to money. And it talks about how it's important to identify that before making any changes. Can you speak to this part? Like why is this piece important?
To me, it reminds me of another book called The Psychology of Money. And when we think about our financial relationships with money, a lot of it is the psychology behind it. How do we think about money? How do we feel with money? Because those ideas, those thoughts and feelings actually can showcase where we value and where we spend and save money. What are the messaging that we grew up with surrounding ourselves as young people? So growing up, my mom is very frugal, money, money, money. Oh my goodness, scarcity mindset, save, 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 save. My dad was, hey, you only live once, spend, 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 get what you want. And so you get mixed messages growing up. And so now as an adult, I'm like, oh, I learned this like bad and good habits from both parents, and I can see where it impacts me. Let me start unlearning and learning new strategies and my own thoughts and feelings around this money and start making peace with it. And part of that was just learning terminology and understanding, oh, like, why do I spend my money on this particular items, these values? Am I doing it for myself or am I doing it for others? Why don't I save this amount? And it's like, oh, like what is the fears underneath all this piece? And so that understanding, that psychology behind money also shows up in my therapy. A lot of times my clients are talking about finances, loss of jobs. I don't have money to do this, or my relationships, and it costs too much to do this, and it's impacting my well-being. And so financial literacy is just as important in our own mental health as well.
The piece about women in particular, I thought was really perfect because as a woman, I think my growing up in, a household where I had one working parent and the messaging around money was scarcity and fear kind of, and there's not going to be enough, like how I've inherited a lot of those views. And I actually had a friend of mine who works in finance she's very passionate about teaching women basically finance 101 and gave a few of us a class during the COVID lockdown on Zoom, and it was life changing for me. Like
Yeah.
I feel like it, even though I was newly out of grad school and making no money, I was like saving my pennies each month, and like I'm eternally grateful to her. Like I texted her when I was reading this book and was just like, "Oh, I'm thinking about you," and I just feel so grateful that you share this knowledge with me because no one ever taught me any of this. And, what's the saying? It's like the best time to start saving was 10 years ago, and then the second best time is today, right?
Yes.
So I just feel so grateful for people that are shouting this message and doing the work to support women and marginalized folks in gaining this education because it's really not out there. Like why are we not learning this in high school? It's like that classic sort of like what are we learning? Line dancing
Yeah.
over, finance. So I really loved the personal snippets that came in from the different voices. And I was listening to this with my partner in the car, and he works in finance, but for a nonprofit. And so he's in the finance world, and he was just like, "Oh, these stories are the best part of this book for people to sort of like understand the societal and like systemic oppression that happens to different folks." And so I just felt like that weaves such a rich tapestry for people to sort of like follow along and hear from real people. What do you think some of the main takeaways for women are from this book?
Yeah. Um, Demand more and then add tax. And that's ask for more and ask for tax, and they'll find money because, okay, this is my bias showing. We expect women to clean up everything and do all the work and not pay them what they're worth. And then we like to place the blame on women and say, well, you should have done, and you fill in the blank of whatever, And so that the biggest takeaway that I really like is truly, you know, you need to ask for more and add tax because you're already doing it. And then, at least coming from a male perspective, is I need to shout louder. because this is not just a women's responsibility. And so I don't like putting that on women's shoulder because it's also just as my responsibility, if I'm going to, continue showing up and trying to be that ally area. But, biggest takeaway is definitely ask for more ad techs, start investing more, even if it's just a couple dollars. It doesn't have to. I think sometimes when we think about investing, we think of like, I have to have this amount of money. I have to have this type of job. Biggest takeaway that I really learned more is protect yourself. I know, Tori Dunlap in her book mentioning starting up your own emergency funds first before the credit cards and before paying off debt. And at first was just like, oh, like why that strategy? And really it's just like taking care and protecting yourself first. Because if you ever hit another jam in life, then you're going to go ahead and utilize those credit cards again, and you're back into that cycle. And so really trying to break that cycle. And so, one of the biggest takeaway, even for myself for that book, there's a line in there that says like, when you do have what you need, build a longer table, not a higher fence. That's pretty much it. It's how like I want to continue living my own personal life is how do I create that space for others, not walls? And how do you start empowering other people? And when we just think about just feminist theory, just in general, is empowerment. And so how do we continue empowering others in all areas?
That was also a line that I wrote down in the book. I thought it was so impactful that it just visualized that in a way that is kind of what the book is all about. It's about financial independence for women, but also like sharing the wealth overall is kind of the message that comes from it. I mean, is that kind of what inspires you most about the book?
Yes, absolutely.
I want to say I also found Tori on TikTok, I think. So, and I was like, yes, I've been wanting to read this book. So I was excited that you chose it.
Yes, yes, yes. I have a whole bunch of books that I read, and ironically, they're primarily by women. So I'm wondering what's the psychology behind that, what I'm gravitating towards. Um,
So thank you so much for chatting with us today. Can you let listeners know where to find you online and also where they can buy your book, right? I'm like, oh, this very thoughtful gesture of wrapping and boxing and writing a note, like I want other people to experience that. So can you let them know where they can find that?
Yeah, so you can find my Pocket Therapist journal book at www.mypockettherapist.co. So www.mypockettherapist.co. You can find me on social media on Instagram at Vanceology. So Vanceology. Ology is the study of. Vance is the name that I go by. So it's the study of me. And I'm really friendly. I check my social media is not ran by anybody else. It's solely me. And so I see and try to respond to everybody. Once again, it's not therapy. Do not send me therapy questions there. Because we love a good boundaries and staying ethical, but informational purpose only. But I love to connect with other people. And, if the people get the journal, let me know. I genuinely love hearing people's thoughts about it and also, next versions of it. What do you want from it? Because it helps me just inspire and continue to respond to the people what they need.
Thanks for listening to Books from Your Therapist. If you are interested in the books we talked about, we'll include links in our show notes. If you'd like to reach out to us with your own recommendations or are a mental health practitioner interested in coming on to share yourself, you can email us at booksfromyourtherapist@gmail.com.
Happy uncovering your stories about love and finance.
Happy being your authentic self in both of those regards.
Mm-hmm.